During the early parts of the Second World War in Europe, the Germans captured many Allied vessels, including Danish, Dutch, Belgian, French, and important to us, Norwegian vessels. A vast majority of these vessels were obsolete and outdated, especially the two Norwegian coastal defense ships, Tordenskjold and Harald Haarfagre, being upwards of 40 years old by the time they were captured in the spring of 1940. Their age wasn't necessarily a problem, as they were in good condition and capable of self-propulsion and could serve the Kriegsmarine well in a very interesting role, a flagship. In today's video, we're going to cover the transformation of these Norwegian vessels, known in German service as Nymphe and Thetis. I'm going to need you to work with me here for a second and visualize this with me. You're part of the German Admiralty in the summer of 1940, and your naval bases are being bombed. You're trying to find some way to protect your bases. There are plenty of AA guns to place at these bases, ranging from Germany to Norwegian coasts, but it takes time to install them and get them to these bases. There had to be a way to get more AA guns to these bases, and fast. Well, quite a few ships were lying around that could be transformed into floating anti-aircraft batteries, including old German cruisers, old Dutch cruisers, as well as old Dutch and Norwegian coastal defense ships that made great platforms to attach AA guns to them. To make things very clear before we get into it, the Germans decided to make things confusing and rename those Dutch and Norwegian vessels to the names of their old cruisers, not being confused with them. There are 6 AA vessels that we'll talk about eventually. The Arkona and Medusa were old German cruisers, and we've already discussed them, simple enough though. The Ariadne was the ex-Dutch Hertog Hendrik, a coastal defense ship. Niobe was the ex-Dutch Gelderland, a cruiser. The Nymphe and Thetis were the ex-Norwegian coastal defense ships Tordenskjold and Harald Haarfagre. Just so we're clear. To take from Aidan Dodson and Dirk Nodelman, in their article from Warships 2023, they write, "At the time of the German invasion of Norway in April 1940, the largest ships of the Norwegian Navy were 4 coastal defense ships, built in pairs in the UK at the end of the 19th century. 2, Norge and Eidsvold, 1900, were sunk by German destroyers on the first day of the attack, April 9th, but the other pair, Tordenskjold and Harald Haarfagre, were captured intact, laid up at Horten Dockyard, and later that same day, both were taken in hand for conversion to anti-aircraft vessels. Still, as the machinery was in good order, both would be capable of self-propulsion, and would have perhaps the most prominent part in the war of all the conversions. The 2 ships were laid down in the late 19th century and had 21cm, 12cm, and 76cm guns, with machinery to make around 17 knots. They weren't bad ships, just old. They served in a variety of roles until the outbreak of war, where they were captured in the spring of 1940. Being virtually undamaged, the ships were selected for conversion work into Flak ships during the summer of 1940, with the work beginning in October. Tordenskjold became the Nymphe, and Haarfagre became the name Thetis. And thank God I can use these names now, because the Norwegian language is insane. Anyway, the ships recommissioned into German service in February 1941. All existing armaments were removed, and single 10.5cm 45 caliber guns were placed on the forecastle and quarterdecks as in Arkona and Medusa, another 2 ships we discussed previously. Being larger vessels from the outset, Nymphe and Thetis carried 2 more guns of this caliber in superimposed positions. According to the original plans, there were to be 8 short-barreled 4cm cannons of an unknown origin, 4 replacing the original 12cm weapons, and 4 abreast the bridge. But in the event of similar short-barreled 2cm guns were planned to be substituted in all but 2 cases. This would be amended shortly after more modern German AA guns of the same caliber were placed. Directors with 3-meter rangefinders were planned to be fitted atop the original bridgework and on top of a platform on the cut-down mainmast. These were certainly fitted in Thetis, but photos of Nymphe made it unclear if she ever carried them. Tall lattice structures fore and aft of the funnel were shortened by 2 meters. Each originally supported a single searchlight. Still, the forward model was later exchanged for a pair of smaller side-edged units in Nymphe, taking from Dodson and Nodelman again. A major difference between the sisters, as converted, was that Thetis had a tripod mast installed aft of the funnel, a feature never present in Nymphe. Also, the latter did not have the shelter deck built out to the ship's sides abreast the funnel. In Thetis, the shelter deck extension supported the ship's boats. In Nymphe, these were carried out on davits. At the end of her career, Nymphe had her forward lattice structure significantly heightened, presumably to receive radar, although it is uncertain whether this was ever installed. Her after lattice structure was shortened at the same time, probably as top weight compensation. These modifications were not carried out in Thetis, although the forward searchlight platform was empty at the end of the war. Information on the careers of the two ships is incomplete, with some confusion regarding their individual histories, so take what I say with a grain of salt. Thetis is generally reported to have joined Marine Flak Oppteilung 709 based at Horstad, Norway, but from the outset, several images taken at different times indicate by changing in her camouflage scheme contradict this. Most images instead show her at Kiel, while another source claims that she was employed at Flensburg from February 1941, protecting the Naval Academy as well as the town and local shipyard against air raids coming from the Flensburg Fjord. This deployment seems to have lasted until December 1942, with a confirmed stint at Kiel in October, when Thetis was reported to have been located at Kristiansand, Norway, finally on her way north. Nymphe was first reported as having been attached to Marine Flak Oppteilung 214 at Kiel, which may reflect a mix-up in names. However, what is certain is that in May 1942, she was transferred to Norway to join Marine Flak Oppteilung 710 at Tromsø. Her first station was in the Oslofjord near Narvik, where she helped defend the anchorage at Bogan Bay. When Tirpitz shifted her anchorage from Bogan Bay to the fleet anchorage at Oslofjord during 1943, both Nymphe and Thetis were redeployed there to provide anti-aircraft cover. Their strong flak batteries played a vital role during the British midget submarine raid in September 1943, which caused severe shock damage and temporarily disabled much of Tirpitz's main battery. After Scharnhorst's loss in December 1943, Thetis was stationed for a time at Skillinfjord, opposite Sternsund, positioned to use her rapid-firing guns against any small craft that might try to enter Altafjord through the narrow passage. Ultimately, in October 1944, both Thetis and Nymphe moved with Tirpitz to Tromsø, but they were unable to stop the battleship's destruction in the bombing of November 12, 1944. Despite claims in some sources, both vessels were named in northern Norway at the time of Germany's surrender. Nymphe was lying at Svolvær when Norwegian authorities ordered her to Narvik, carrying her German crew along with troops from the Luften Islands to surrender formally. Shortly after sailing, however, on May 17, 1945, she was deliberately sabotaged by a reportedly drunken German crew, who opened several seacocks, forcing her to beach at Kuna Meloy. She sank in shallow water with her upper deck awash. In 1948, she was sold to be broken up, raised, and scrapped there. One of her anchors is preserved today outside Lofton War Memorial Museum in Svolvær. Thetis, meanwhile, ended the war near Horstad, where she was present during the May 4, 1945 bombing of the harbor and Operation Judgment. She was returned intact to Norwegian control, served briefly as an accommodation ship, and in 1947 was sold to be scrapped, being dismantled the following year. An interesting subject, I think. Let me know what you all think about these AA ships down in the comments, and what other possible ships we could talk about in the Captured Vessels series. Although these Norwegian coastal defense ships were interesting, there are a lot of ships out there. French, Danish, and other nations' vessels were put into service in the Kriegsmarine in some capacity. Anyway, please remember to like and subscribe, as it'll help the channel to grow. Until next time, my friends, have a great week.